The ancient Egyptians left behind careful directions for getting into the underworld. Which doors to pass, which guards to name, how deep to go down before the path splits in two. For a long time, experts filed all of it under religion, the make-believe of a people obsessed with the afterlife. So why do the directions keep matching real things in the ground? Beneath the stone road at Giza, there is a shaft that drops through 3 levels into a flooded room, and cut into the floor beside the coffin is a single word: house. The house of the Lord of the Passages. But this story does not start under the stone road at Giza. It starts on the floor of a wooden coffin, hundreds of miles to the south, where someone painted the oldest map of the underworld that anyone has ever found. The place is called Deir el-Bersha, a cliffside burial ground where the local governors of Egypt's Middle Kingdom were laid to rest. The coffins buried there carry a text experts on Egypt call the Book of Two Ways. It is the oldest picture guide to the afterlife known to exist, older than the famous Book of the Dead by hundreds of years. And unlike most funeral writing, it is not vague. It is drawn. 2 long, winding paths run the length of the coffin floor, one marked as a road of land, the other as a road of water. The 2 of them split by a strip the text calls a lake of fire. Both paths lead to the same place, a place the Egyptians called Rostau, the land of Osiris, lord of the underworld. The scribes had a second name for it. They called it the Guide to the Ways of Rostau. A guide, as in directions. In the year 2012, a Belgian archaeologist named Harco Willems opened a burial shaft at Deir el-Bersha and found pieces of a coffin missed for 100 years. When the text was studied and published in the Journal of Egyptian Archaeology, it turned out to be the oldest copy of the Book of Two Ways yet found, somewhere close to 4,000 years old. Only about 24 copies exist anywhere on Earth, and every one of them is, when you get right down to it, a roadmap. Now, the boring reading is simple. These are spells, religious comfort for the soul, a way to feel ready for a journey nobody alive could check. And for most of the Book of Two Ways, that holds up fine. It is full of gods and demons and gates no shovel is ever going to dig up. The trouble starts with how exact the map gets. This is where the story takes a turn most people never expect. The text does not simply say the soul travels into the underworld. It counts the gates. It measures the distance between them. It names the points where the land path and the water path cross. And it warns, in plain terms, which passages close behind you. Everything the Egyptians wrote afterward kept this shape, mapping the world below as a set place with numbered gates and a guard standing at each one, copied onto tomb walls for over 1,000 years. A whole people does not copy out the same daydream for 1,000 years. They copy out a map. The place has a name worth sitting with: Rostau. In the older texts, the word means something close to the mouth of the passages, or the way into the tunnels. It reads like the name of a real place, the way you would name a harbor or a mountain pass, and the Egyptians tied it to one exact patch of ground. That patch of ground was Giza. The full old name of the plateau, kept in the texts, was Per-Wazer Neb Rostau, the house of Osiris, lord of Rostau. The Egyptians did not name the Giza plateau after a pyramid or a pharaoh. They named it after the underworld passages they believed ran beneath it. By its own old name, the most famous stretch of ground in the world was the house of the Lord of the Tunnels. Which brings us back to the shaft under the stone road. The stone road, running up toward the second pyramid, the Pyramid of Khafre, passes at one spot right over a hole cut into the solid rock. It was marked on a map as far back as 1837, and later listed, without much interest, as Tomb Number 1. For the next 100 years, it sat flooded and ignored. In the 1930s, an Egyptian archaeologist named Selim Hassan cleared part of it, then ran out of money before he could reach the bottom. The bottom stayed underwater until 1999, when the water in the ground finally dropped far enough for Zahi Hawass and his team to pump it dry and go all the way down. What is down there is 3 levels. The first shaft drops about 9 meters to an empty room. From its floor, a second shaft drops roughly 14 meters more, into a wide hall circled by 7 small rooms, each holding a stone coffin. 7 rooms around a center hall, deep underground, and anyone who has read the funeral texts feels a small jolt at that number, because the journey through the underworld is told again and again in 7s and 12s. From that hall, a third shaft goes down again, 12 meters or so, into a room the builders flooded on purpose. In the middle of the water sits a low island, and on it stands a single dark granite coffin, with water channels cut into the rock on every side. Hawass read it as a stand-in tomb for Osiris, a holy building made so the living could go down, in body, into the land of Osiris. And the strongest proof for that reading is also the smallest. When the team lifted the lid of the granite coffin, they found a single carved sign in the floor underneath it, the sign for Per, house, the same word buried in the plateau's old name. The deepest room anyone can reach under the stone road, marked with the same word the Egyptians used for the whole plateau. So far, all of this fits the boring version. A stand-in tomb built by people who took their funeral texts seriously, dated to the 6th dynasty, around 2300 BCE. A neat answer. Two details refuse to sit still inside it. The first is the effort. Cutting a maze of shafts and rooms 35 meters down through solid rock is punishing work, the kind of work a people only does for a king. This one holds no king, and the official story says it never was meant to. The second is on the west wall of the middle level, where someone cut a tunnel straight sideways into the rock. When Hawass's team looked at it, they sent a boy through to see where it led. It just stops after about 6 meters. A tunnel to nowhere, or a tunnel that was closed. There is one more odd thing, and it is old. The Greek writer Herodotus visited Egypt in the 5th century BCE and described, among the wonders of Giza, an underground room ringed by water, said to hold a tomb. For a long time, nobody could match his story to anything real. The flooded island room at the bottom of this shaft matches it almost exactly. The place was known and talked about more than 2,000 years ago, then lost again until the 1990s. Enter a British researcher named Andrew Collins. In the early 2000s, Collins was chasing a different thread. Not the shaft under the stone road, but a rumor, as old as the pyramids themselves, that somewhere under the Giza plateau there was not a tomb but a cave. A natural one. A real underworld of tunnels the funeral texts might have been describing all along. The rumor had a paper trail, and that is what the public never heard. It did not come from a mystic. It came from a diplomat. In 1817, the British Consul General in Egypt, Henry Salt, explored the plateau alongside the Italian adventurer Giovanni Caviglia. In his notes, Salt described going into a set of underground tunnels at Giza and following them for several hundred yards, until he and Caviglia reached a big room that connected to 3 more of the same size, with tunnels running off in every direction. Caviglia pushed 300 feet further down one of them before turning back. They stopped not because the tunnels ended, but because they found no gold. Then the record goes quiet. Salt's story made it into print, then dropped out of sight. The way in he used never made it onto the maps that came after. By the 20th century, the standard list of every known tomb at Giza, the book every Egypt expert trusts, had no mention of Salt and Caviglia's tunnels at all. A set of caves long enough to walk through for several hundred yards had simply dropped out of the official record. You would think someone would have followed it up. For most of a century, nobody did. Collins, working with an Egypt expert named Nigel Skinner Simpson, pieced together Salt's path and narrowed the likely way in to one missed tomb west of the Great Pyramid. They went looking for it on camels in March of 2008. They searched the tomb and found nothing, and were about to move on, when they noticed a crack in the rock face at the back. A crack once sealed shut with a wall of mud brick. Behind it was a natural cave, not a small one. Pay attention here, because this is the part that matters. The opening led into a room. The room led into more tunnels, and those kept going. Collins and his wife followed them for more than 100 meters before the bad air, the bats, and the lack of gear turned them back. The cave did not end where they stopped. It ran toward the pyramid field. The southwestern corner of Khafre's pyramid sits only about 480 meters from the way in they had found. But this was no longer one tomb with a crack in the wall. If the caves followed the natural cracks in the plateau's rock, they could run for kilometers under the whole burial ground, joining the underground rivers the local guides had always said ran under Giza. Collins named the Tomb of the Birds, after the mummified birds packed into it long ago, marked by the modern survey as NC2, and he made one clear claim. He said it might be the true Rostau, the mouth of the passages, the western doorway into the underworld the funeral texts kept describing, sitting in the rock exactly where the old map said a doorway should be. If a 200-year-old set of notes were the only thing backing this up, it would be easy to wave off as one explorer talking himself into a legend. But then, the ground spoke up. In 2006, a team studying the Eastern Plateau with radar that scans into the ground published results pointing to a web of empty spaces under the rock there, linked together, natural, and mostly unmapped. The caves Collins crawled through were not supposed to exist. The radar hinted that a lot more of them did. Then came the official response. Hawass, who controlled who could get onto the plateau, openly said no to the idea that any natural cave system ran out from the tomb. He said there was no underground cave system at the site, only man-made tunnels no longer than 35 meters. Collins disagreed, sharply, and said he had photos and film of cave tunnels running far past that line. Skinner Simpson kept coming back to the same uneasy fact that the standard list had wiped Salt's tunnels out completely, as if a piece of the plateau's record had been taken out on purpose. And then the way into the Tomb of the Birds was sealed shut. Whatever ran past it became, once again, impossible to reach. The version of Giza you have heard, the one with 3 pyramids, a sphinx, and a neat grid of tombs, is not the full picture of what is under the sand. This is where the story leaves the part everyone agrees on, and it is worth being clear about that. Collins's trips were paid for in part by the research arm of the Edgar Cayce Foundation, a group that has backed work at Giza since the 1970s on the strength of a prediction that a hall of records from a lost people lies hidden in a room under the plateau. No one has reached it yet. And the boldest reading of all, the one in the title that pulls people toward stories like this, says these tunnels do not stop at the plateau. They keep going, down and inward, toward a world inside the earth. That idea has a long history. The writer Zecharia Sitchin spent his life arguing the old texts should be read word for word, as real records. Hidden rooms, beings from somewhere else, machines buried in the deep, and most experts treat his readings as fringe, not fact. So, this part is just a guess, and it is fair to call it that. But a guess has to start somewhere, and it usually starts at the exact spot where the proof stops being allowed to go any further. And under the guesswork, something stubborn is still on the table. The Egyptians wrote careful guides to an underground world of tunnels they called Rostau, and named the Giza Plateau itself the House of the Lord of those tunnels. Under the stone road, they cut a real shaft, 3 levels deep, down to a flooded room marked with the word house, with a side tunnel closed on purpose. 200 years ago, a diplomat walked through natural caves under that plateau for several hundred yards, and then those caves vanished from the record. 100 years later, radar found empty spaces exactly where caves like that should be. A researcher who went looking found one, sealed behind mud brick, running toward the pyramids, before it too was closed off. And every time anyone has gone down to check, they have come back with the same 3 things: tunnels that were closed, records that went missing, and an official word that there is nothing down there to see. Where those tunnels finally lead is the one thing no one has been allowed to follow to the end. If the explorers who found them had been allowed to finish, this might be a settled question instead of an open one. They were not. So go back to the bottom of the shaft, under the stone road, to the granite box on its island in the still water, and the small sign cut into the floor under the lid. House, the house of the Lord of the passages. For most of 200 years, the people who study Egypt have read that word as a symbol, a quiet poem about the afterlife, written by people who could not possibly have known what was really under their feet. Maybe that is all it is. Or maybe the Egyptians were doing what they did with everything else they touched. The stars, the seasons, the rising of the river, writing down, as exactly as their words would let them, something they had really seen. The directions are still there, cut in stone and painted across coffin wood, counting the gates, measuring the halls, marking the exact spot where the path splits in two. The tunnels those directions point to are still under the plateau, and nearly every door anyone has opened to look has been sealed shut behind them.